Hello friends, welcome back to VOWIAS. Welcome to the discussion of the mains test series, and this is part 4 of the third vision mains test. So these are the things. So now let's quickly begin and discuss from question number 16 to question number 20. Hope you have seen the third part where we have discussed from question number 11 to 15. Now we will start with part 4. So the 16th question is basically on the East India Company's relation with the Britain from 1765 to 1833. So what was their relation all about, and how the British government has exerted its influence over the East India Company? All of these things was asked. So in the period of dual government between 1765 to 1772, the Indian officials were under the British governor, and British officials had the responsibility but without power, whereas the East India Company had power but no responsibility. So the Indians who were in the British, who were working for the British, all of the Indian officials especially, they had all the power to they had all the responsibility to take care of everything and all, but they didn't have enough power because the power was with the East India Company. This led to exploitation of power and attracted jealousy of other sections of the British society. So then the politicians and merchants who wanted to get huge profit generated in India, they started to impose restrictions and they started to control the East India Company. The relations between East India Company and its positions with the government in Britain was settled through the subsequent acts and regulations, like the Regulation Act of 1773. So you can say this is the first act that recognized political and administrative functions of the company. What it did is it strengthened the control of the British government on the East India Company, thereby strengthening the British control over the Indian territory. They appointed this court of directors. These court of directors were the governing body of the company, and they will report on the revenue, civil and military affairs in India. And then we have the governor of Bengal. This governor of Bengal is a critical person. He was made the Governor General of Bengal, and the governors of Madras and Bombay were placed under the Governor General of Bengal. So this Governor General of Bengal will be the head of all the three provinces, and the other provinces were subordinate to him. It also prohibited servants of the company from engaging into private trade. So the company workers could not engage in the private trade. So this was done to avoid this conflict of interest. Next, we had the Pitt's India Act of 1784. The Pitt's India Act of 1784 distinguished between the commercial and political functions of the company. For the first time, the company's territories in India were identified as British possessions. It allowed for the court of directors to manage the commercial affairs, but created a new body called the Board of Control. It empowered the Board of Control to supervise all the operations of civil, military or the revenue of the British possessions in India. Okay, so that means the Court of Directors to manage commercial affairs, but you have the Board of Control to manage the political affairs. So the powers were clearly differentiated among them, Court of Directors and the Board of Control. Okay, the Board of Control will supervise the overall civil and military administration. Thus by this, what they have done is they have increased the control of the government over the company and the Indian territories. Next, we had a Charter Act of 1793. This 1793 Charter Act continued the trade monopoly of the East India Company for another 20 years. As we all know, from 1813 onwards, the monopoly was ended. But even then, after 1813, the company had a monopoly over tea and opium. But later on in 1833, this entire monopoly was ended. This 1793 Charter Act also separated the revenue administration and judicial functions of the company. The judicial functions were separated. The senior company officials was debarred from leaving India without permission. The members of Board of Control and their staff were to be paid out of Indian revenues. That is the thing. Before 1857, most of the money though went on wars, but after 1857, most of the Indian revenue went for the payment of salaries to these British people, because the entire staff and everyone were paid out of Indian revenue only. And next, we had the Charter Act of 1813, where the company's rule extended to another 20 years, but their monopoly over the trade was ended, except in tea and opium and trade with China. Next, the important act is the 1833 Act, which is the first step towards centralization of Indian administration. It ended all the commercial activities of East India Company, including the monopoly we just discussed. Also, it created the Governor General of India. Governor General of India, because in the 73 Act, we just saw how the Governor General of Bengal was made the how the Governor of Bengal was made the Governor General of the British India. So in 1833, what they have done is they have separated the Governor General of India and Governor General of Bengal. The Governor General of India will be the Governor General for all the three provinces of Bengal, Madras, and Bombay, and he is the highest person. The Governor of Bengal will be a separate person only, because till 1833, the Governor General of Bengal is also the Governor General of India. But from 1833, this post was separated. Governor of Bengal is separate and Governor General of India is separate. So all the revenues were raised under this authority. It got complete control over the expenditure. The power of superintendent, control and direct all the military and civil affairs of the company was under him. So this was the 1833 Charter Act. So like this, we have to write all of these Charter Acts and we have to write the major provisions. So next question, the 17th question, is on Bose, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Subhas Chandra Bose had played a great role in Indian freedom struggle. He under C.R. Das had played a major role in the enlightening of students right from the beginning of his youth days. And if you see, he started the newspaper Swaraj in 1921. So he is the person who left the Indian civil services even after qualifying and came and joined politics. He was imprisoned. He was imprisoned after 1921. Later on, after release from Mandalay jail in 1925, he was elected as the president of All India Youth Congress and secretary of the Bengal State of Congress in 1927. In 1930, he became the mayor of Calcutta and the president of AITUC, the All India Trade Union Congress. This AITUC was founded by M.N. Roy. And next, during his exile in Europe in the 1930s, he came into contact with various communist leaders. So it was Bose on whom the communists had a major influence. After being elected as president in the Haripura Congress session in 1938, he set up a national planning committee which brought a policy of broad industrialization. He advocated the arms resistance against the colonialism and could not come to terms with Gandhiji over the non-violent resistance. That means he wanted to use arms against the British, which is against Gandhiji's non-violent resistance. Despite being elected as the head of the Congress in 1939, he still resigned at the Tripuri session because he did not have support from Gandhiji and all. Then he formed his own party called the All India Forward Bloc to bring together the leftist faction and fight for freedom using the arms. Bose was he was under house arrest, but later on he escaped and tried to forge an alliance with Germany. He then traveled to Japan and he took all these prisoners of war, and then he formed this Azad Hind Fauj in Singapore. In July 1943, he arrived in Singapore from Germany and took over the reins of the Indian independence movement in the East Asia. He even formed the Indian government in exile in Singapore. He recognized Azad Hind Fauj, that is the Indian National Army, comprising of the Indian prisoners of war. He formed the provisional government in Singapore, as we just discussed, and it was INA under Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose leadership was able to free Andaman and Nicobar Islands from the British. But the defeat of Germany and Japan and Germany in the World War II forced INA to retreat, and it could not achieve its objective. But still, the INA had played a great role in liberating the British in liberating India from the British. The INA's role was impeccable, and they showed great valor, which even today we celebrate. Lot of great INA officers. They have played a great role in all these battles, be it the Naga battle or be it the important Kohima battle, be it the battle in Andaman Nicobar Islands. In all these things, these great officers like Dhillon and Shahnawaz Khan, all of them played a great role. Right. So this is about this Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. But as we all know, we can end after all these things. Even after doing all these things, he was killed in a flight crash later on in Taiwan. So that also we can just add in the conclusion. Next, 18th question is on the role of press in the Indian national movement. The press played a significant role in raising awareness among the people during the during the time of the British. The first printed newspaper, the Bengal Gazette in 1780, by the Indian nationalists, attracted the modern civil liberties inspired by the French Revolution. This can be a good introduction. In 1824, Raja Ram Mohan Roy protested against a regulation restricting the freedom of press. Okay, so the Vernacular Press Act and all these things we can just mention. Now the critical role of press we have to write. So the political work of INC during its initial years was helped by press. The nationalist movement between 1870 and 1918 had not resorted to mass agitation. Press was the chief instrument in arousing, training, and mobilizing and consolidating the nationalist public opinion. So for all of these things, press played a key role. The influence of press is not confined to large cities or towns. It carried messages of leaders and the nationalists to far reaches of the country, and the library movement sprang up all over the country. The opposition to the government by criticizing their activities, the work motto of oppose, 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 all of these things were done by the press. The papers like Amrita Bazar Patrika, Kesari, Maratha all played an exemplary role. We have to write these important newspapers, Kesari and Marathi by Tilak, the Amrita Bazar Patrika, which overnight changed into an English paper because of the Vernacular Press Act. So these or you can say the way they played their role in arousing the consciousness of the people, in arousing the nationalist sentiments among the people. So we have to write all of these things. Next, the press also faced many challenges. What are the challenges? The Sedition Law 124A and sections 153A, 565 of IPC. Tilak faced 3 years. Faced 3 trials with respect to sedition and imprisoned twice for the same thing. The Vernacular Press Act of 1878 passed by the colonial government to suppress the local newspapers. In early 1900s, the colonial governments brought a draconian act like the Prevention of Seditious Meetings Act of 1911, the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1908, and so on. So the awareness about all these acts was raised by the press, and the thing is that all this impacted the press a lot. All this curbed the freedom of the press. The Amrita Bazar Patrika turning into an English publication overnight is a great example of that, to avoid such draconian laws. But now it is a fundamental right under the Constitution for the people to have their press, or for the press to have the speech of the freedom and the ability to propagate whatever they think. Okay, so like that we can just write the conclusion. Next, the 19th question is on the Indian philosophical school of thoughts. The various Indian philosophical school of thoughts were there, and they are very, very famous. So for prelims we generally read this, but for the mains we don't read in general, but we have to have a fair bit of idea about all these school of thoughts, the 6 important school of thoughts, and what did they talk about and who was their founder. So various schools of philosophies, if you see, the Shada Darshana, they fall under the category of this orthodox system, and their final authority is the Vedas. They are the Sankhya system. First is Sankhya, propounded by Kapila Muni. It holded that the world is made up of 2 realities, Prakriti and Purusha. Next, the Yoga, founded in Yoga Sutra by Patanjali, wrote in 2nd century. It is by purifying and controlling changes in the mental mechanism, Yoga releases Purusha from Prakriti, the yogic technique to control body, mind and sense organs, which is the means to achieve freedom or mukti. Next, Nyaya by Gautama, the author of Nyaya Sutra. The Nyaya technique of logical thinking has categorized knowledge into, or categorized different ways of acquiring knowledge, that is by perception, inference, comparison and testimony. All of these are the major ways. Next, you have the Vaiseshika by Kannada. So this talked about the atomistic theory, and they said that the world is made up of 5 realities: earth, water, air, fire and ether. God is the guiding principle, and living beings are rewarded or punished as per the law of karma. Next, you have Mimamsa school of thought, where analysis of interpretation, application and use of text of Samhita and Brahmana portions of the Vedas. Next, you have the Vedanta, so the philosophy of Upanishad concluding portions of the Vedas were there in this. There is no distinction between Brahma and self according to Shankaracharya. Even Acharya Ramanuja's philosophy also comes under the Vedanta. Shankaracharya believes that Brahman is existent, unchanging and highest truth, and Brahm is there in everyone. So that is the meaning of Aham Brahmasmi, which was said by Shankaracharya. So these are the various things. Next, there are some unorthodox schools as well. The Charvaka school, it does not believe in any Vedas. Hedonism is the highest, you can say, highest goal, right? So next, Buddhism you have, where it is a non-theistic school. It talks about the Four Noble Truths and Ashtanga Marg, that is the Eightfold Path. Next, there is Jainism, which talks about multiple realities, Anekantvad and Syadva, the partial knowledge. Only Kevalins, those who have infinite knowledge, can know the true answer. All of these things are there. Okay, so these are the various school of thoughts and their interpretations about the God and the reality. Next, the 20th question, the last question. Guys, just before this, a small information. The document that we are using is the summary document prepared by VOWIAS from Vision IAS Mains Test Series. This summary document will help in reduction of your revision time. After you have gone through the questions from the test series, if you want to revise these questions in a very fast forward manner, our document will help. In this document, we did not remove any old or you can say we did not remove any content which is important for the exam. We just have removed the non-important content and we have summarized in such a way that the total number of pages will reduce, so that you can revise the same content multiple times in a very short span of time. Okay, now let's move on to the 20th question. The 20th question is the Nagara and Dravidian style of temples. This Nagara and Dravidian style is very important for us. There are few similarities as well as dissimilarities. First, we will start with the similarities. Similarities first is Sanctum Sanctorium, that is the Garbhagriha. Here the main deity is placed in both these type of architectures. You have the Mandapa, where there is space for cultural people's gathering. You have the central tower or Shikara, which is the tallest part of the temple. You have the Vahan, which is mount on the temple's main deity, which is the vehicle. And next is sculptures. Sculptures are heavily engraved on both these kind of architecture. But the Nagara and Dravida has certain basic differences. What are those? So first is Nagara school is famous in North India, whereas Dravida in South India. The Nagara had multiple spires, where the Dravida has single spire. Next, the Nagara had multiple Mantapa towers, whereas the Dravida had only one Mantapa tower, which will be present. The Nagara is curvilinear in shape, so there is Shikara, this curvilinear is Shikara, and depending on the shape, it is divided into Latina, Famsana, and Vallabhi types. But in Dravida, the central tower is shaped like a pyramid. This pyramidal tower in South India is called Vimana. But in Nagara, there is this curved shape. In Nagara, the compound wall does not exist and deities will always be present inside the temple. Whereas in Dravida, temple boundaries are given very high importance and the deities are kept outside as well. Example, the Sriranga temple in Tiruchirappalli. Next, at the entrance, there is this Garbhagriha. The image of Midhunas, Ganga and Yamuna are placed in the Nagara style. Whereas in Dravida style, the entrance of the Gopurams had fierce Dwarpalakas. Dwarpalakas are nothing but the doorkeepers. Okay. And in the Nagara, the pedestal, if you see, it is higher than ground level, whereas in Dravida, the pedestal is at ground level. And also, no water reservoir will be found in the Nagara, whereas the Dravida style has a water reservoir enclosed within the temple complex. For example, the Nagara style, you have Sun Temple, the Vittal Deol Temple, the Kandarya Mahadev Temple at Khajuraho, all of these things. But if you see Dravida temples, you have Virupaksha Temple, the Shore Temple, Meenakshi Temple, Brihadishwara Temple, all of them we can just write. Okay. Apart from Nagara and Dravida, you also have the Vesara style, which is an independent style created through selective mixing of Nagara and Dravida. So this we can just briefly mention the conclusion. Okay, and also you have to draw the diagrams as well for these kind of questions. The diagrams will fetch you that extra half mark for each. So that will definitely increase the marks cumulatively at the end. Okay, so these are the questions for the day. Tomorrow we will meet again and we will discuss the next test. Right. Till then, keep studying and stay tuned. But before I leave you with this information about the programs that we are running. Okay, so tomorrow we will again meet. Till then, keep studying, stay tuned. Jai Hind.